The BJP-led NDA government has introduced the One Nation, One Election Bill in the Parliament today. The Constitution 129th Amendment Bill 2024 and the Union Territories Law Amendment Bill of 2024 were introduced in the Lok Sabha and sought to make simultaneous elections at all levels a reality in India. The government has argued that holding frequent elections each year negatively impacts the economy, polity and society. So, it has recommended conducting simultaneous elections to tackle it. The amendments are in line with what 8-member high-powered panel led by former President Ramnath Kovind recommended in its report, which was accepted by the Union Cabinet in the month of September this year. Now, according to this, in the first phase, elections will be held for the Lok Sabha and state assemblies, and subsequently municipal and panchayat elections will take place within 100 days. The opposition parties have rejected the idea of one nation, one election. The opposition has criticized the bill as unconstitutional, undemocratic and an attempt to centralize power. Let's quickly listen into some arguments that took place in Lok Sabha today.
This proposed bill hits the basic structure of the Constitution itself. And if any bill, any act which hits the basic structure of the Constitution, that is ultra-virus, and it is ultra-virus.
Mr. Speaker, sir, beyond the 7th schedule of the Constitution is the basic structure doctrine. And that basic structure doctrine spells out that there are certain features of the Indian Constitution which are beyond the amending power of this House also. One of the essential features is federalism and the structure of our democracy. And therefore, the bills which have been moved by the Honorable Minister of Law and Justice absolutely assault the basic structure of the Constitution and are beyond the legislative competence of this House.
कि इसको जेपीसी को दे देना चाहिए। जब ये संविधान सुधार का विधेयक, संवैधानिक संशोधन जब कैबिनेट में चर्चा में आया, तब प्रधानमंत्री जी ने स्वयं मंशा व्यक्त करी थी कि इसको जेपीसी को देना चाहिए। इस पर विस्तृत चर्चा सभी स्तर पर होनी चाहिए। इसलिए मुझे लगता है कि इसमें सदन का ज्यादा समय जाया करे बगैर, अगर मंत्री जी कहते हैं कि इसको जेपीसी को सौंपने के लिए वो तैयार है, तो जेपीसी में सारी चर्चा होगी और जब जेपीसी के रिपोर्ट के आधार पर कैबिनेट इसको पारित करेगी, तब भी फिर से चर्चा होनी है। तो मैं मानता हूं कि माननीय मंत्री जी अगर जेपीसी में रखने की इच्छा व्यक्त करते हैं, तो यहीं पर एक चीज समाप्त हो जाएगी।
Now, One Nation, One Election Bill has been referred to the Joint Parliamentary Committee as of today, but the bill is causing a big divide among parliamentarians. From the very first election held in the country in 1952, India voted in One Nation, One Election format. But all that changed in the year of 1967 when India voted for the last time under One Nation, One Election format. Then the era of coalition politics came into being, and ultimately this led to the end of simultaneous polls or elections in the country. Now, is this reintroduction of the bill and its opposition a political compulsion, or are there any merits in these arguments? To talk about that, joining us on the show is Dr. Anil K. Verma, is the Director, Centre for Study of Society and Politics. Also with us is Bipin Sharma, political analyst and senior journalist. I want to come to you, Dr. Anil, first. What are you making of all the arguments that played out in Lok Sabha today? Before I really come to the merits of One Nation, One Election, do you believe that the opposition, what it's feeling about the bill, is legitimate?
Well, I think that some sort of, apprehension is there about the bill, which is not very substantial. It's more related to the political culture prevailing in the society today, that there is a distrust between the ruling and the opposition party. And there is also a distrust between, the ruling and the opposition party because of the fact that there are certain lingering apprehensions regarding the EVMs and other things, which pertain to the procedural aspect of the democratic politics. But my thinking is that had there been a substantive argument against one nation, one election, then the first four elections that we had, they should be also bracketed the same, apprehensions and saying that it is against the democracy and the constitution and federalism. So, are we going to say that the first four elections that were held in India, they were anti-democratic, or they were against the federal principles or against the constitution? That is one. Second thing is that in United States, nobody would dispute that there is democracy and federalism and constitutionalism both. But United States of America is a country where not only the legislative elections are held, but also the executive elections are held simultaneously, right from the President of the United States of America to the lowest corporator and governor and everybody, legislators, representatives, senators, members of the state assemblies, they're all held on one single day throughout the all 50 states. So that secondly, even in Britain, if we go, we find that there has been, an attempt in 2011. The parliament passed the Fixed Term Act, and there are other countries also like Sweden, you have South Africa, you have Belgium, you have Indonesia, and other countries where simultaneous elections are going on. So I fail to understand that there is any substantive arguments against one nation, one election. This is my first point.
Dr. Verma, since you mentioned some of those crucial points, I just want to get a clarity from you. You mentioned that in the first initial years, up until one nation, one election ceased to be a reality, there were no questions raised on its merits. However, one nation could not continue because various assemblies had to be dissolved at various times, and therefore the process of one nation, one election crumbled in itself. What is the chance that this will not be a hamper tomorrow? That's question number one. Question number two, you drew parallels between India and the US, India and the UK, Belgium and several other countries where one nation, one election is currently a reality. Would it be fair politically, culturally, and the diversity of this country, would it be fair on all these levels to compare it to any other democracy?
There is a tendency. I will take your first question first, and you made a very interesting, observation about the possibility of dissolution midway. If you have read the Kovind Committee report, and I have gone word by word with that report, I have read the 281 pages that are in print in the Kovind Committee. I was very much impressed by the recommendations that the Kovind Committee had made, and you will be surprised that the Kovind Committee has introduced three terms. One is the full term, one is the unexpired term, and one is the mid-term. And so what they are suggesting is that at one point of time, whatever that point of time, it may be 2029 or any cutoff point in the future. But once you have the process of elections started simultaneously, then any dissolution, any instability in any state government will happen. There will be a constitutional amendment which will say that the mid-term election will be held only for the unexpired term. That means even if some state assembly elections or parliamentary elections happen in between or before the full term, then the subsequent mid-term election, which we call mid-term poll, will not be held for next 5 years, but it will be held for the unexpired. That means the remaining term of the parliament and so on. And therefore, even in the event of any dissolution midway, there won't be any instability, and the cycle of simultaneous election will continue to be there. So that is the first thing, which I am deeply impressed by the Kovind Committee report. And therefore, even otherwise, I would be suggesting, if I was to suggest one moderate amendment in the Constitution. You see, all the instability in the Constitution pertains to one single word in the Constitution. And that word, I had also made a recommendation to the Kovind Committee in this respect. And that word is that there is a term which is used, dissolution of the parliament. But if that one single word is removed from the constitution, and we just say that it would in the event of any no confidence motion, or the prime minister or the chief minister, government resigning, the assembly shall be, or the parliament shall be put in suspended animation, not dissolution, and let the parties figure out how they will continue to be after that particular point cut off time. And we can also go back to the German constitution, which is Article 67 of the German constitution. Is a very interesting provision in the German constitution, which says that there has to be a constructive vote of the confidence. Anybody who is proposing a no confidence motion has simultaneously to propose an alternative vote of confidence, and they both will go together. So if the no confidence motion is defeated, then the confidence motion is defeated too. That means if the no confidence motion is carried, then immediately you get a new prime minister and a new government. So that's a very interesting provision in the German constitution, which unfortunately the COVID committee has not borrowed. So there are so many things which the parliament, JPC can debate, and it can be further improved upon in the JPC.
All right. Bipin Sharma, political analyst, senior journalist, also joining us on the show. Bipin, thank you very much for taking time out. First question first. What are your views on One Nation, One Election? We, of course, were debating up until now on the merits of One Nation, One Election. And, Dr. Verma was of the opinion that this will do more good than harm, as opposed to what opposition political parties are suggesting. It will be good for the country. And also discussing briefly as to the recommendation of the high-level panel that was set up under former president. Your first views on One Nation, One Election, please.
See, a coin always has two aspects. So merits and demerits, that's a given. So reforms are the need of the hour. And if we go back in time, last few decades, so reforms have been an ongoing process in the system. But the most critical aspect is dialogue and discussion. I think that is mandatory, sacrosanct for any robust democracy. So unfortunately, that is not being seen. And who is bearing the brunt at the end of the day? It is the common man who is left disgruntled when he sees frequent adjournments, disruptions in the parliament, because he is expecting a smooth process. When he participates in the festival of democracy, he reposes colossal faith in the system, in the politicians, in the leaders. But then when it is a complete, it's a damn squib, that's without any results. So he's dismayed. And as far as One Nation, One Poll goes, it's part of the electoral reforms. But the ironical part is that last few years, disruptions, adjournments, sloganeering, that has been a regular feature in the parliament. So now it all boils down to see how this will actually take shape when it is tabled before the JPC. But then you have to take both points into consideration, the merits and the demerits. When you talk about opposition, their main contention is, their main assertion is that it will be an assault on democracy, a dictatorship kind of policy that has been adopted by the ruling dispensation, and then attack on the federal structure of the constitution. And on the other hand, the prime minister of the country made it amply clear that the basic structure of the constitution cannot be altered. Even if Dr. B.R. Ambedkar comes, he will also not be able to do that. So on one hand is the ruling dispensation pitted against the opposition, which is going hammers and tongs against One Nation, One Poll. But the larger point here is, who is to benefit in the longer run? Because if you take into consideration the fact that what are the advantages, what are the merits attached to One Nation, One Poll? First of all, it can save a lot of expenses, because frequent polls hampers the growth story, the economy, the polity, and not to forget the frequent model election conduct, so code of conduct, that also hampers the development process. But on the other hand, the demerits, which the opposition is talking about, is, attack on the federal structure and attack on the self-governance by states. So that's a critical aspect.
Okay.
what
I also
man-
quickly, since we are making some of these statements, let me also try and highlight what the opposition parties are saying concretely. How is it an assault on the federal structure? How is it an assault, on the federally defined constitution, the state of India? And I want to get Dr. Anil Verma back into this conversation. Dr. Verma, there is a finding by IDFC which says that about 77% possibility is that voters will be voting for the same party at the centre and for the states if there were to be simultaneous polls, which essentially means that the state assembly polls will be swayed in favour of the party which is at the centre. That's number one. Number two, they've also said that the BJP is trying to homogenize electoral opinions across all facets, essentially suggesting that voter behaviour will be swayed in favour of the BJP, since BJP is at the centre, and local parties, regional parties will falter, will not have the same benefit as a central party. Do you agree that some of these could be the demerits of one nation, one election?
You see, I mean, apprehensions are such things about which no concrete evidence either in favor or, against can be given. Of course, apprehension everybody has a right to have, and dissent everybody has.
Right. Dr. Verma, there is evidence, because in the 1962 general elections, the party that won union swept across all assembly polls, including Madras, Gujarat, Bihar, Andhra Pradesh and Assam. And you can make an argument to this point that we are talking about 62, where there was limited choice and people were usually voting for the Congress party. But there is enough and more evidence to suggest that people are going to vote for the same party in the state as they are voting in the centre if there were to be simultaneous polls.
That's what I'm saying, that if going by your logic, you remember the 1967 polls. 1967 polls were also held simultaneously, but that didn't happen. What happened in 1962? So there are contradictory evidences also. And coming to the latest example, Uttar Pradesh is a very good example in the Lok Sabha today, that in the 2024 Lok Sabha election, the BJP was badly defeated in Uttar Pradesh, and these examples can be multiplied. So looking and sticking to one particular, example and making it a big issue, I think, because in democracy, people have a tendency to change their preferences. No party stays in power for all the time. So if all these arguments are in favor of one political party, sometimes obviously the opposition will come to the power, and then the entire, things will be converted. They will probably feel that they are going to be benefited by one nation, one election.
Dr. Verma, the point is that no one party should benefit, no matter who's in power. And these are not my arguments. These are arguments that are coming to fore from people who actually study the Constitution. But let me also quickly get Mr. Sharma back into this conversation. Bipin, you talked about how there are arguments in favor of one nation, one election, and I want to come to them now. And one, of course, is that every time model code of conduct is put in place, India loses big time, not just by the way of development work, but also by the way of higher inflation, and a substantial percentage of the GDP to the tune of about 1.5% is shaved off because government cannot really introduce any policies.
So the moot point here is, why does the common man participate in the process of elections? Because he has enormous expectations. So when there are fragmented and frequent polls in the country, then of course it goes without saying that the development process is going to get hampered, jeopardized, because with the frequent imposition of the model code of conduct, and then a lot of projects are to be kept aside. They have to be kept in abeyance, limbo. So that is one very positive aspect. Then, of course, the enormous expenses that go into conduction of a electoral poll. But then the point, which is quite valid on the part of the opposition, that the opposition needs to be taken into confidence. Their viewpoints need to be considered, be it one state or be it 10 states. Irrespective of how many numbers has one political party amassed. But then the larger point is, in a healthy, robust democracy, it is essential to take all diverse viewpoints and then logical, some concrete, substantial point of coherence. I mean, where one would all concur on one forum. Because, you see, no party can deny that reforms are not needed. But then If reforms are not introduced, then of course, as I said initially, that the common man would be left disgruntled. And that is what is happening, because frequent disruptions, frequent adjournments is not going to do any good to the country and the common man per se. So I think we are all eagerly awaiting dialogue and discussion. And here, one very critical aspect I need to make a mention of. You see, we duly realize that China is our enemy number one. But even then, we don't have a closed door policy with them as far as the diplomatic level.
Right.
So we continue to have dialogue and discussion with the Chinese counterparts. So same with the opposition also. No different rules apply here. So you need to take opposition into confidence, and dialogue and discussion must happen. It's an ongoing
Right.
process.
Absolutely. And the dialogue and discussion will happen now that the bill has been referred to the Joint Parliamentary Committee. I want to come back to you, Dr. Verma. Now that we are looking at a Joint Parliamentary Committee going through these bills, and the opposition, of course, is going to make its voices heard, there are 2 to 3 contentions that some of the leaders of the India bloc have also mentioned, and that is how many state assembly terms would need to be curtailed for one nation, one election to be implemented. That is number one. There's another, of course, contention that high-level committee which was set up under the aegis of former President Ramnath Kovind did not really have any representation from the federal structure, neither a state chief minister nor a former chief minister. So no representation was made really from the states per se. So one of course the contention is how are states going to be reacting to it, and the nitty-gritties of course have to be worked out on whether the bill will have to go through states, whether the states will be voting for it, not voting for it. What, according to you, will be the biggest challenges for the implementation of one nation, one election?
I mean, the biggest challenge, to my mind, happens to be the distrust and mistrust between the opposition regarding this bill. You see, the main thing is that I have still to come across a substantive argument. They say that it is a dictatorship, it is unconstitutional, again the federal structure. But I have seen that America is a very good example that it is a constitution also, it is a democracy also, it is a federal also. And one nation, one election, I mean, there you don't find any kind of a difference, and you will not say America is a homogenized country. There are diversities also, a lot of diaspora is there also. In the Indian context also, the same thing is there. And the JPC must understand this thing, and probably they will, that you see, as my predecessor speaker was saying, that India is a country of diversity, and you also mentioned this. But at the same time, we need to understand that every time we cannot be focusing on democracy. And as you have asked, if you look at the agenda up to 29, every year I have figured out that every year there is going to be 3 or 4 elections. So the election commission is always seized with one or the other election. It hasn't any time to coolly reflect upon what the electoral reforms are required. That is one thing. Second, Prime Minister and all chief ministers, related chief minister, are involved throughout. And the Prime Minister is obviously involved because he happens to be the leader number one for a particular party, and other opposition leaders also, they are constantly involved in campaigning and wasting time. Besides the wastage of public money, it's a lot of energy and the time that we are wasting for the development of the nation is concerned. So this is also very important. And thirdly, the most important thing is that what agitates the opposition is that they are apprehensive that one nation, one election will homogenize the voters' behavior. This is absolutely, a misplaced, apprehension. And I don't think that people of India, after 75 years of robust democratic experimentation in the country, should be put like this, that they are a lump and they will be falling in trap of one political parties, whether it be one nation, one election or several elections. We are a mature democracy, and the opposition is still sticking to the procedural aspect of the democracy. Let us move from the procedural aspect of the democracy to the substantive aspect, which we say the discourse democracy, which we say the participatory democracy. So we are still sticking in the process. Nani Palkiwala, you must have heard his very famous saying that elections are like the heartbeats. If they are very frequent or they are very slow, then there is a danger to the entire body. In the same way, elections are very frequent, then there is a danger to the body politic. So let us not focus only on election, that every time we have an election, let us believe, let us trust our electorate, let us trust our democracy, let us experiment with one nation, one election, and we can always change things. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't mean like Britain, it went for one nation, one election in 2011, and they withdrew in 2022. So for
Right.
11 years, it experiment with a fixed term parliament. So in the same way, let India also experiment with the one nation, one election. If it works out, then very fine. We will fully, you know what happens whenever elections are
You
happening.
know,
All the teaching is stopped. All the
right.
teachers are put on duty. So why should the students suffer because of these elections? The development of the country get hampers. So all these things are very important. The apprehension of the opposition, I think, is largely misplaced.
All right, largely misplaced. You know, you're a teacher, Dr. Verma. I think you understand how tricky it is to be comparing a Britain to an India with such diversity, where it takes years to bring reforms in. It's not that easy to go back to the previous systems. As difficult it is to bring up a reform, so is to let go of what is not working for the country. But I think we'll all hope for the best as far as one nation, one election is concerned. Dr. Anil K. Verma, Bipin Sharma, thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us on the show today.